Okay. All right. So let's get started. Good evening, everyone. I'm trying something a little different tonight. Actually, I'm trying to do a simulcast. So um, I have myself live on uh, Instagram on my phone, and then I'm coming to you through YouTube on my computer. So let's see how this works. I'm hoping that the volume check, check, check. I'm hoping that the volume is good on both. So let's try this out. Um, so how does it sound on your end, Word Man? Can you let me know on YouTube if it you can hear me and see me just fine? Volume is good, and you can see me too. Just waiting for the Word Man to get back to me. Okay, and how's it sound on sounds okay, thank you, Dawson. Hey, miss you too, Dawson. I got some past students on here. Very kind of them to join. So, yeah, so whether you are are tuning in on YouTube or Instagram Live, welcome to the chapbook release reading for my new self-published chapbook, Greco-Mormon. So that's the cover. I've been showing this on Instagram. And this morning, I published on my author website a bit of some background and info for those that are interested in checking that out. So that you can do that if you like. I don't. It's not going to be necessary for the reading this evening to know a lot about the poems, but I provided some context because a lot of this stuff is specific to my personal history, to my history as a former active member in the Mormon Church, to my history as a stepson, as a seeker, as someone that is wrestling with the vicissitudes of patriarchy and toxic masculinity and all kinds of stuff. So what is it that is passed down to us? How do we process that? How do we deal with that? So these are some of the questions that I'm trying to ask in the chapbook. So I'm going to start with one of the long. Going to start with one of the long poems called "Shadow Canyon and a Bridal Veil," and this has a line underneath. And it says Pioneer Day 1984. So Pioneer Day is actually it's July 24th. It's a holiday for Mormons in Utah in particular, and it's a celebration of the arrival of Brigham Young and um, the first pioneers to the Salt Lake Valley. So and the idea that that is sort of the beginning of the settlement there after their journey on the Mormon Trail. But also, it was a day in 1984 that was, in fact, very bloody. There was some of you may have seen the Hulu TV series Under the Banner of Heaven, which was based on the book by John Krakauer and his uh, you know it's not really reported. It's just sort of a nonfiction book about the Lafferty brothers and this murder that these murders that they committed against family members and others who they saw as a threat, but also claimed they were given a prophecy to kill them, which is known as blood atonement. So killing in the name of religion is something that unfortunately the Mormon Church, like a lot of other Christian churches or other monotheistic faiths, can't say that they've not been involved in. So And oddly enough, Pioneer Day, the day after Pioneer Day in 1984, was the day that my biological father and my mom were married, um, and then I was conceived. So yeah, so there's deep Mormon history here. There's personal history. It's all kind of happening together in Shadow Canyon and a Bridal Veil, Pioneer Day, 1984. The Utes knew that staying in one place meant death. Death like white caked on the nostrils of bats in Mount Tipanogos. Cave is nothing sweet. Sedentary life is temporary joy. A campfire keeping some wagon train warm, but mostly expending its heat to the source over what will become the city on the shores of Utah Lake. I was conceived the summer the brothers received their revelation. Death tasked, a saintly pursuit for the lattermost days, mother and child unmade by a servile knife, removed from the hands of laymen lost on a butte of prophecies, and what tongue, what tortured speech. One brother now past claims demon breath on nape of neck. Death removes life, and nothing's it. Bountifully, by whistling MD, I came open-eyed, seeking father's face and mother's breast. Umbilical clipped, but they held the knife, cut that mutilates to reveal what is hidden. Direct revelation, two make one, like Aristophanes yacked about at agathons, two brothers inflamed by language not their own, emasculated by a power that Jung's Hegera carried or carried into. This is the place of granite and blood and pittance of cattle, sent along the Uinta to starvation camps of Lamanites, of Nephites, to brothers implored to forget in a new way, as the Spanish had carried Christ before them. Removal of my hands on waist, a blushing. We were young man and young woman, but she was tall, Tuscaroran, showing us how we ought to step, to dance, to touch, squeaks and clacks, sweat and standing apart. I moved away, never settle, CC home on the range. Appointed an angel at the end of earthly life, a ministering servant, but for what and to whom? Valet of light? Butler of manna? More likely an interstellar mail clerk of Kolob in the to and fro bureaucracy of spheres, between celestial, terrestrial, telestial, maybe getting around to learning Aramaic and Greek and Hebrew, or Smith's Egyptian. Meetings back down the Mormon Trail at winter quarters. If we find a Missouri militiaman, makes gestures above his chest, laced fingers not in prayer. At Chimney Rock, the order was extermination. Looking up at the formation, we could have been turned to smoke. At Devil's Slide, it's a recapitulation of all of God's tests. Their callous hands, like cart spokes. An earthquake loosed Moroni's trumpet from the square's tallest spire. No seagull swift or large enough to descend upon the locust, alighting its honey gold. No announcement either from the presidency of any sign to receive, impart. Just the earth happening to speak without a new line of shiny braces. Bloodline of my brothers and I of the early 8,000 to emigrate from Sweden, immigrate to the kingdom. where a temple was to be built like and unlike Abbo's hall. No timber posts nor spring from Yggdrasil, but gold's not far in the dream mine to cast chains around a cognate encircled by mountains, tithed of water and blood. Here in a valley of quartz monzonite, in canyons, the blot of massacre cracks the cornerstone. Gone to school to unlearn prophecies and abide the colors of Bifrost. Brother to BYU, me way past US 189, onto lectures by Calliope. From class to class, an empty chair always beside me with registered blessings and hot air from unloaded chambers of Utah County. Even if I never knew, especially if I didn't know, and definitely now I do. So that was Shadow Canyon and a Bridal Veil. One of the long poems, there's two sequence poems, so a poem made of smaller poems. And yeah, that one's the second one. I'm not going to read the other one. It's a bit too long. So let me go back to the beginning of the chapbook. I'm going to read the opening poem. The opening poem is called The Happy Search. The Happy Search. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about my fit for the night. This is my fit. My fit is a Scandinavian work shirt. So this is for the Swedish ancestors. Okay, here I go. The Happy Search. Faith can move mountains, and so can bulldozers. Don't go looking for the happy with spoonfuls of knowledge and the will of your weakest colleague. Neither build on top of the flattened rubble a marble doorway to forever. What asks of us for belief is the same dog loyal to the meat of the heart. After 2 years of therapy, the ravaging of human rights and planetary habitations prolonged in our drowning, I pay to be asked from the shoreline why I'm not out with search and rescue that's seeking first the happy. Therapy's been good, despite the tone of that poem. I just got some trouble with happiness. It's a hard thing to believe in, in this world. Okay, so I've just got a couple more. I'm not gonna, read through the whole. I won't read through the whole chapbook, but I will say that the chapbook is available. If you go to my Instagram at Dawn's Early Light, let me write that in the chat here for those not on Instagram. But yeah, if you go to at Dawn's Early Light on Instagram, you'll see my link tree, and then you can click on that link, and it'll open up, and you'll see an option for store and under or shop or whatever, and then under there you'll see the links for both this chapbook, which we're reading from tonight, Greco-Mormon, and as well as my second chapbook that I still have some copies of. I got about a dozen or so copies of haiku composed on an English tour, which is actually the first chapbook that I ever put out by myself. So Greco-Mormon, I shop this around a lot. I sent it out to a lot of contests, contacted some people, who I knew that did printing, and asked if, it was something that they wanted to collaborate on or put out. And I just, I got to a point where I felt like this is something I wanted to get out to people. So I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, and anyone that, ends up wanting to purchase the chapbook. Chapbook's, it's $10, but mailing postage, is included. If you want to get a copy of the haiku chapbook, though, It's normally $5, but if you bundle it with Greco-Mormon, I'll take $2 off. So just give me lucky 13 American dollars and it's yours. So, but again, very limited supply on the haiku chapbook. But that's a fun one too. So Utah, I was born in Utah. I was born in Provo, Utah, in the high desert in the Great Basin, and it's a strange place. I went back out there a couple years ago on an Amtrak train trip across the country, and this poem was inspired by that Amtrak trip, and it's called "Utah as a Man." Leaving behind the Colorado and colors begin to drain. The red striations, waters of green, their shades and varieties, it all tones down to craggy mountains. The recessed faces of the mesa like chins running from lips, skeletons in the sagebrush, rotting teeth in the desert's mouth. Strange air from Skinwalker Ranch, mingling with the haze of forest fires west, orange twilight as the carrot top of somebody's crying stepchild. And something in the sediment, the sedimentariness of it all, that yes, is so alike Judea's wilderness and so much more alien than ancient kingdoms. A taste salt cannot season, a creature that can't be tracked and shot. It doesn't matter how big are your fish or arched your monuments, Utah. You're not the Johnny Be Goods we answer to at the front door. Your shadows are sharper, deeper, and darker than any other state at night, stitched under the breast pocket of the passed out Amtrak rider beside me. That was Utah as a Man. Yeah, so I mentioned, in the Shadow Canyon and a Bridal Veil poem, this talking about my brother and I, my brother Grant and I, and how we're descendants of these about 8,000 Swedish Mormon converts, because Sweden and Denmark in particular were like the first two non-English speaking countries that Mormons went to after England. So those were like the first international converts, and then they got some non-English. Now the church is actually at quite a crossroads, because the membership is at about I think it just passed 17 million, but half that membership is international, is non-English speaking, is not in the Americas. So what that's going to mean for the church, I don't know. But it definitely, puts kind of further in the rearview mirror the very white and the very sort of already Christian denomination converting to the Mormon Church. That sort of conversion is becoming less frequent. So let's just leave the Mormon stuff behind. I've got something completely different now. It's a little bit of a poem. I'm kind of tipping my hat to Charles Bukowski, Hank, and but it's also about just having dreams, nightmares in particular that plague you, that keep coming back. And yeah, I don't know. Nightmares have been pretty present in my life as of late. So this is about trying to take melatonin to get some sleep, and then just having the nightmares really kind of get under your skin. So maybe some dream interpreters can let me know what these are all about. So this is called Pre-Dawn with Hank. I woke up too early from the melatonin dreams, each one more twisted than the one before. especially the one where I was back in one of the apartment complexes where my dead father stalked with his load down the hallways, storming into my room while I'm trying to sleep on a rigid futon, looking for something he lost, a Creedence or Steely Dan album, but when music pumps out, it's NWA or Public Enemy, which he never listened to. When I woke up out of that dream, a piece of winter clothing was hanging from the corner of our closet door, looking like the dark spirit of my father, angry at me for not yet interring or spreading his ashes. What was worse, in the other dream, was this brown racing horse from the previous night that had become a gray nag, shape-shifting into an even smaller ashen ewe with its sickly lamb near off, dripping greenish milk from a baggy teat, unable to gum the apple I had intentionally packed into my subconscious for the horse, fallen over on its side, wailing. And this was just outside a small riverside bungalow where someone who never went outside lived, next to the most terrible and magnificent willow tree with its hairy limbs just tickling the surface of a placid flood river. So I can't go back to the melatonin dreams. And I take a sip of stale bedside water and feel colder than ever. I get up and put on a few layers and pull out the large volume of Bukowski in the dark over my sleeping partner's head, by memory, feel, heft, and go light a candle at my desk in the living room before the sun sent its pale blue cross-eyed scouts across the vault, but not before truck after delivery truck after garbage and recycling truck after early commuter stops a while, idling in mute agony outside the grocery and news we call the bodega. With all this, chill gusts, incoming dawn, crows cawing, cheap drinks and fatty snacks, delivered while Main Street is whipped by an always slightly crippled village life. I'm up with my single prepper candle and 500 pages of Hank, quietly content, quietly laughing off the melatonin dreams with a poetry that reassures one that even if you're no longer sick, you'll never be that healthy belonging to this fatherless and unsatisfied race. And still, I am delighted to witness when I bend up my neck, straighten my back, the first whizzing snowflake in a slow pissing light. Oh, thanks, Richie. It's sweet of you to say. Appreciate that. You were a great student. It was my pleasure to have you in the classroom. Hope you're doing well too, man. Okay, I just got one more poem that I'm gonna read. I wanted to keep this short. If you're here in Catskill, I don't want to keep you from Cowboy Dell and his karaoke night down at Avalon Lounge, or if you're elsewhere in the country, um, maybe you're yet to have dinner. So appreciate you imbibing some poetry before your meal. Um, okay, I wanted to just sort of feel out what the last one would be. So let me take a second here. Um, Tried to go with the lighter poems, the darker ones you can discover. Um, well, here I'll go with this one. It's an appropriate one. It's called "In My Arms." Uh, Brooklyn and Buffalo tuning in. Excellent. All right, and we got Savannah, Georgia, and some in Catskill here too, and in Hunter Tannersville, and that's great. I thank you so much for tuning in. Feeling the love. So. The first half of this chapbook, like I said, there's a lot about ancestry, a lot about like kind of thinking about my roots and going back, and I've had a lot of death in my family over the last 7 years plus, actually, and I lost my my dad, who, when I say dad, usually to most people, I mean my adoptive father, Bob Burns. I take my last name from. Um, Phil Janson, as you can see, and as maybe you guys also saw, I have a different pen name for the Greco-Mormon, and that's August Janson. And that's because I needed to kind of create a pen name, distance myself a bit from some of the more personal stuff I was writing. It was helpful to do that. Little advice I got from the great TV show Lodge 49. If you haven't seen that, check it out. But where was I? This poem's about Bob, because I made all the funeral arrangements when he passed away, and had his ashes sent here to Catskill, and with the idea, this was during the pandemic, with the idea that we would have a funeral service at another time, and we haven't yet. There's been a lot of other family issues that have come up. Life happens. So, but the beginning of this poem, I hope is successful in not seeming to be about a death, but more about the beginning of life, because that stuff's connected, isn't it? It's just one circle. So this is, I'm going to close this up in my arms, and then I'll just stay on here for a little bit longer if anyone has any questions about what they heard. And then I'll leave you guys to your night. So thank you so much for tuning in. In my arms. The first time I can carry you in my arms, I walk with you down the street you can't tread. In the town you don't live in, the village I do. I show you around, whispering about this building, that strange man I have a story about. I tell it to you, though you can't understand me. You can't really hear me. But I speak anyways, arms around you. After the postal worker took forever to find you. What seemed like forever was a bit of the forever, which will be the remainder I live without calling you on Sundays or planning a visit, never to be made before the ER. And now you've been sent, never so light, never so thin, except for maybe when your teenage mother held you in California's sun, before the Baptists swaddled you in charity and bound you in the device of adopted family. And as your eldest, as we climb the stairs, as I climb the stairs with you, it's your lightness that pulls down my face, that I can only wipe without you in my arms. Okay. So that was my reading from Greco-Mormon. We've got a question on YouTube, but I got my eyes on both screens. So if someone ends up having a question on Instagram Live, I'll see that as well. So Gary Wordman asks on YouTube, question: why did you pick the various photos for the book? Yeah, great question. So I would refer you to the long post that I have on my WordPress. So if you just go to garydaleburns.com, just garydaleburns.com, my full name. The first thing that will pop up will be a Greco-Mormon background and introduction. And in there, I have all the images that I use. So I can show them to you briefly and kind of give you a brief explanation. I won't get into the details, but first one you see here, this is a clipping from a map that was printed in the late 19th century that details the first route of the Mormons from Illinois, from Nauvoo, Illinois, near Carthage, where they were religiously persecuted and had to leave and go west. So It shows the route, and eventually, well, I'm sorry, it actually goes this way. So we're here in Carthage, Illinois, and then, going through um, Nebraska, Kansas. I'm sorry, Nebraska, Colorado, and so forth. So I chose that just because it fits this, just fit the family roots. So you know, the starting point really of things. Inside, we've got this guy. This is a sunstone that was a relief sculpture on the Nauvoo Temple. Which was in Illinois, which the Mormons had to abandon, and then was later burned down by an arsonist mob in about 1847, 1848, I think. So we got that. It's just a funny face. It just kind of, I don't know. There's something about that sunstone. My brother and I probably think when we think sunstone, we think Chrono Trigger, the Super Nintendo RPG as well. This one's much more striking. I think I've shown this before, maybe on Instagram, but this is a photo of the Oakland Temple. Shout out to Kaylee, because she grew up in Oakland and used to see this in the Bay Area all the time and thought that this is Disneyland. And And it's not Disneyland. It's a Mormon temple in Oakland. But the red sky, this was during the SCD complex fire in August to September of 2020, which started shortly after my dad passed away. And yeah, there was just something about this sky that's just really haunting. And some of the other poems in here, I'm also trying to think about climate crisis and our time on this planet. The theology I was raised up in does believe that that the earth, will be remade, will be reborn, will be restored to its former glory, and after being consumed in fire. So the idea of that the damage that we're doing now will kind of be resolved in the future is sort of a counter to the idea of stewardship and taking care of the planet. Not that that's what every Mormon believes, but there is something stark about just the sky. And then lastly, I've got Gary Lime. Well, not super lastly, I got the back cover, but you'll probably recognize this. This was the stumper from when I did the Tuesdays for the Poetry reading. This is an illustration of Ubbo's Hall. This was the temple at Uppsala, which is north of Stockholm, modern-day Stockholm in Sweden. This was the center of Norse worship in the medieval period. It was burnt down, destroyed in 1087 by the first Swedish Christian king, Inga the Elder. So it's a different temple. There's modern temples, old temples, and as I say in the WordPress, it's really kind of there's something ironic about leaving a place that also used to have a temple, and going to another place to build a temple many centuries, a millennia basically, between. And then lastly, we've got this back cover with an amalgam of images. Here we have something that's mentioned in a lawn sequence poem that I have in here called Humelody. This is the Bingham Canyon Copper Mine. I don't know if you can check that out. It's the largest man-made excavation on Earth. It's the deepest hole. It's the most earth and matter that we've to this date ever moved. So it's just like a perfect image of the Anthropocene. It's just a perfect image of kind of the opposite of temple building and the opposite of really any kind of human endeavor. Even though it's mined for copper, there's a purpose to the extraction. At the same time, the extraction takes away from, the earth, and they've had multiple landslides, and it's an extremely unstable, destabilizing thing. Um, so also, I've got a space shuttle postcard that's actually copper. I wish I had it with me out here now. So going off into space. There's another poems. There's stuff about that. If anyone here has seen The Expanse or read the Expanse series books by James S.A. Corey, there's an interesting little bit about how in this imagined future that Mormons continue their sense of diaspora and pilgrimage and missionary work by going to the stars, by planning a like 100-year mission out. But I wanted to be an astronaut, and there's something about the next exploration that is significant to me. And then we got these little animals representing uh, Taurus and Ursa Major and Cygnus the swan. And then we've got a Greek statue and a little Bonanza Steakhouse sign. Bonanza Steakhouse. That's where we're gonna put Taurus the bull once we're done with that constellation. We're gonna make steak out of it. Okay, we got some other questions. How has being Mormon affected your poetry? Well, all I can say is that the King James version of the Bible is the version of the Bible that I was raised on reading. It is a very poetic text. It's something that the church I grew up in still uses. It's 400 years old. It has produced an influence on a lot of poets over many centuries. And yeah, what else? I'm not sure. I think this chapbook's an exploration of like how my faith that I grew up in affected the way that I think about the world and the way that I imagine a person's place in it, the way that faith can affect the way people move around the planet, or possibly how they might leave the planet in the future. I just think that kind of question is not as explored as maybe the more humanistic side. So, which is represented by the Greco part. So like Greco-Mormon, we got Greece, Western civilization, secular, democratic. We've got Mormon, theocratic, more conservative, religious. So I do kind of feel like the tension between those things has helped kind of produce a lot of my who I am and what I do in my writing. Got a question over here from Instagram Live. My Mormon migration diaspora. Yeah, I mean, it's in my blood. I mean, that's really sort of what I mean with the movement. And how do I imagine the balance between the poetic voice and subject matter, particularly in the last poem? How do life events affect the poetic process for you, if at all? It's a really good question. I call this chapbook my most personal chapbook because things that are happen to me, I try not to overly identify with, in the sense that I kind of view the world as like what ends up happening to me is the result of a lot of factors that I'm not fully cognizant of. I'm not fully conscious of. So how can I be more conscious of where those lines of influences are and where they sort of come from, and how that might affect me as a writer, is a question that is always on my mind, certainly. Voice and poetic voice, that's something that has shifted. So I would say maybe every few years, um, there's a new tone, there's a new sort of way in which I am writing lines or framing ideas or producing language, and I have to really pay attention to that. And that is so. What it is for me is I do kind of believe that there is such a thing as a muse, whatever that is. Again, I was raised in a church that believes in the Holy Ghost, that and I think and within the context of the religion that I was raised, my gift with language is a gift of the Spirit, or would be viewed as a gift of the Spirit. In a different pagan way, it would be seen as a muse or some sort of god that under which I am doing my work under its auspices or care, and that I need to listen to. That I need to listen to, and I need to pay attention to, and that the writing is a response then. But suffering grief, and I could say, there is a lot of grief, and a lot of the Greco-Mormon are elegies. There are poems that are dedicated to people who have been murdered, people who have died, not just my ancestors, other stuff. But yeah, I mean, a there's a sedimentariness, as I sort of said in one of the earlier poems. There's layers, and the personal layer is sort of just whatever has happened to me on the surface and the top. But then this idea of sort of like I know we don't give a lot of store to the idea of like bloodlines, but we seem to be entertained by the idea. People love Game of Thrones, and they love fantasy that really concentrates on like family, and that's such a value in Mormon theology, and in the sort of culture is family is a unit through which it's a unit of salvation. It's a unit through which not only current generations but past generations can be tied to you and brought into glory. Um, so that's big. That's really big. But for me, I think I have some with the August Janson, this voice. August Janson is me trying to take a step back from that and do a kind of juggling act. or in the air while I'm also trying to excavate something. So that's a long-winded answer, but a really good question. What else? How does being Mormon affect my poetry? Okay, so yeah, I think I kind of addressed that for sure. We got Bryn and fellow Exmo from Provo. Oh, from my hometown. This hits deep. Desert imagery made me miss home. Yeah, the desert imagery. The desert is so. There's really nothing else like it. So some of my students are on here. If you guys haven't been to the desert yet, when you guys get out on your own, um, be sure to travel. Head west. The scale and the vastness of everything is a totally another level. And there is something in particular, Bryn, that in the Utah as a Man poem, is the night feels different. I don't know what it is. There's something about when I lived in Utah when I was a kid, the sky is just so vast, and the darkness is just so much deeper. And I think it's just because on the eastern seaboard here, there's so much artificial light that's thrown up into the atmosphere, and everything is so much more dispersed out west. And yeah, it just gives you a better sense of the vastness of what's out there. Jake, yeah, Pessoa, I have yes, the volume of his poems and his prose work, and they were definitely an influence. And they continue to influence me. Yes, definitely. Pessoa was yeah. I would say also probably John Berryman's Dream Songs. Big influence. Oh, here we got some trucks Trucks on Main Street, so big. They'll probably show up in other poems, but yeah, Berryman for sure. Jeffrey Hill's a big influence for me on my poetry. So there's kind of a, there's kind of a, I'm listening to British influences, European influences, as well as American influences. Whitman, you can't escape Whitman or Emily Dickinson. I just think, with The Shadow Canyon and A Bridal Veil, I was reading and thinking about Dickinson and also H.D. Hilda Doolittle, going back to their work. And yeah, so, well, I gotta make sure that people get to Cowboy Dell and his karaoke night over in Avalon. So I'm going to bid you all farewell. Thank you so much for tuning in either on Instagram Live or YouTube. The dual cast kind of worked out. I think this kind of worked. So if you'd like to support me, if you'd like to throw me some bones for Greco-Mormon, just go ahead, find my Instagram. Again, it's at @DawnsEarlyLight. It's in the chat here on YouTube, and then you guys have it there on Instagram. So thank you so much. Everyone at Strand says hi. Oh, my people. Ben, if you tuned in tonight, thank you so much for tuning in. You are an angel. You are one of my angels. I think some of the poems in here he may have read before he passed from this world. Ben McFall. Oh my gosh! Last month I rewatched his memorial that was in the Rare Book Room, and oh gosh, to touch lives, the way that Ben McFall did. I'm trying as a teacher. I'm trying as a teacher, and again, hey, hello to my students. Miss you guys at 100 Tannersville. If you've already graduated and you're just saying hello, I'm wishing you the best in the world and in life, and read some poetry. Keep my mind sharpened on that. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Be well. Bye.